Good morning. I would like to call to order on today, the May 13th, Tuesday, May 13th, the public hearing for the City of Tampa's Historic Preservation Commission. Welcome, everyone. I am Carrie Ann Canch, the Vice Chair of the Commission. If you're here to present a request, please be thorough but concise at the microphone and identify yourself, your relationship to the project before beginning your presentation. The commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Staff will briefly introduce the application. Applicants and staff shall have the right to give testimony and to present witnesses and documentation. Time shall be limited to 30 minutes. Staff will then present the staff report. We will then ask public comments. Please state and spell your name clearly if you are here to speak for or against the project. Your time will be limited to 3 minutes. So take some time now to summarize your comments because 3 minutes goes by very quickly. Following the public comment, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The commissioners will ask questions of the applicant and staff. The public hearing will then be closed. The only comments that will be allowed after the public hearing is closed will be the response to any questions from the commissioners. The commissioners will then discuss the case and will make their decision based on the City Ordinance, Chapter 27 of the City Zoning Code, and the testimony given at the public hearing. The Historic Preservation Commission can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owner agents are independently responsible to obtain any appropriate permits and or approvals. If you haven't already done so, please silence cell phones, and I'll go ahead and introduce the commissioners. Starting.
Bruce Gibson.
Susan Swift, planner with Boggs Engineering and Boggs Design Partners.
Tom Pluckon, University of South Florida.
And then also the staff, Dennis Fernandez, Elaine Lund, Alexis Guzman, Heather Bond, and legal, Camara Pettis Mackle. And here we are. And we'll have our chair introduce herself.
Greetings, my apologies. It's Tampa traffic, and I left my envelope. Greetings, everyone. My name is Dominique Cobb. My apologies for my tardiness. I am the chair for Historic Preservation. Thank you all for coming today. Can we introduce them? Thank you. All right.
We're at number 3, the approval of the minutes.
All right. Thank you. All right, at this time, if everyone can take a look at the minutes, and once everyone has taken a gaze, if we can have a vote to accept the minutes from November 5th, 2024.
I move to accept the minutes.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, at this time, we have accepted the minutes for November 5th, 2024. At this, hey Dennis, you look a little different. Looking good.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we'll have any announcements from the Historic Preservation staff.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Welcome to today's hearing, to both you and to our applicants and those in the public joining us. Just to begin, I do want to point out that we do have the May edition of the Tampa Bricks and Mortar in your packets, and that is available online. That's our monthly newsletter that we produce that features preservation topics, and this month we're focusing on May as Historic Preservation Month. It's celebrated both throughout the state and the country during the month of May each year. With that, I did want to focus on one particular property in the city of Tampa in this month's Preservation in Progress, and that is going to be presented to you briefly by Lane Lund with staff. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation Staff. As Dennis stated, we have a presentation for you this morning that celebrates the Junta Homestead and Farm, a very important place in the Ybor City Historic District and also important to the history of the city of Tampa. The Junta Homestead and Farm is located in the Ybor City Historic District. It's located entirely within the local boundaries of the Ybor City Historic District. You can see the red line on the map in front of you, which demarcates the local district. And it is interestingly located partially within and partially out of the National Historic Landmark District. The property was acquired in the 1920s, and the house on the site, the Junta home itself, was built in 1924 for Salvatore and Victoria Junta and their family, who were Sicilian immigrants. The property was designated as a local historic landmark in 2020. One of the reasons that we did look at landmark designation for this property was that it was bisected by the National Historic Landmark district designation, and also just because of its importance as a resource type in Ybor City. While the Sicilian immigrants are mentioned in the designation reports for the Ybor City Historic District, they're not called out specifically as a resource type. The Ybor City designation reports do speak a lot to the cigar factories and the Cuban and Spanish immigrants and the Sicilian immigrants, but are heavily focused on the cigar factories and the social clubs and societies in Ybor City. So we felt that this particular aspect of the Ybor community was important to recognize. The Junta Homestead and Farm consists of almost an entire block at the near the intersection of 24th Street and 11th Avenue. The house that the Junta family has lived in since 1924 sits at that intersection, and the rest of the property consists of the farm. There's a greenhouse and a chicken coop on site, as well as the field and the orchard. And there is a garage on the site that also contributes to the property. The Junta house itself is a lovely craftsman bungalow. You can see some of the features of it here, including the decorative brickwork, the verge board, the stickwork in the verge, and the porte cochere on the east side that leads to the garage in the rear. And there's a photo of the garage when it was constructed. It was a little later in 1950s, but it still contributes to the site. And that concludes the presentation on the Junta Farm. We're very pleased to have it as part of our local historic landmark inventory. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. With that, moving on, we're now going to disclose any conflicts of interest in ex parte communication and ask our legal counsel to lead that discussion.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the Legal Department. Will the Commissioners please state on the record whether or not they have any conflicts of interest regarding any of the items that are listed on the agenda?
Do not.
None.
I have none.
I have none.
Thank you so much. Likewise, will the Commissioners please state on the record whether or not they've had any ex parte communications regarding any of the items that are on the agenda?
I have none.
Thank you so much.
I have none.
Morning, we have one continuation to deal with. That is a continuation from today's hearing into the July 15th, 2025 HPC hearing at 9 a.m. for HPC 25-000020 for 116 West Davis Boulevard. And before you act, I did see that there's a representative here from the property and some agents, so I didn't know if they wanted to address the board. Okay, no? So we will need a motion to continue to the July 15th hearing, please.
All right.
At this time, is there anyone on the commission that would like to make a motion for continuance until July 15th, 2025?
I move to continue HPC 25 0000020 until July 15th, 2025.
I second that motion.
All right. At this time, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So moved.
Thank you. We are now ready for our swearing. So anyone in the audience who's going to be presenting or providing public input at today's hearing, if you could please stand and raise your hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. May be seated.
Moving to our first item on the agenda for your consideration. It is a request under HPC-25-0000016, which is a demolition review under Section 27260, and subsequently potentially a secondary review for economic hardship claim under 27259. This is a property located on Davis Islands, listed on the National Register of Historic Places within a multiple properties listing that's being considered for a demolition permit. It's a pretty extensive presentation and process. The staff's going to present first because the sections under 27260 and 27257, the first segment of this review, are initiated by the city. So the city is in essence the applicant for that portion. So the applicant would present first for 30 minutes, and then the property owner will have the following 30 minutes to also provide information or any testimony that they see fit. And then depending on your action on that, we will talk about the subsequent part of this review at that time. So I'm going to ask Elaine to come up and present you with the information.
Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation Staff. Let me make sure I got, okay, making sure we get the right presentation here. So we are here today to look at 418 Blanca Avenue, located on Davis Islands, for a Section 27260 review. The applicants have applied for demolition for this property, or rather the owner has applied for demolition of this property, and as such, that's why we're here to look at it. Section 27260 of the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances requires that the HPC administrator, which is Mr. Fernandez, review all demolition permit applications for any building, site, structure, or object that is 50 years old or older to determine whether it meets the criteria of Section 27260B1. Applications that meet this criteria are to be reviewed by you at a public hearing. So this section of the code, we look at buildings that come in for review under this section of the code on a daily basis. There's many buildings that are proposed for demolition within the city do meet this age requirement. However, the majority of them do not meet these criteria. The criteria are that the building be listed individually in the National Register of Historic Places, or that they meet the criteria for individual listing on the National Register, but have not been locally designated under this chapter, as or that they are identified as contributing to a historic district that is either listed or pending for listing in the National Register, but it has not yet been designated locally under the provisions of this chapter. For this particular property, the demolition application for the demolition permit was submitted in December, on December 12th, 2024. HPC staff and the administrator reviewed the property and determined that it was listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1989 as one of the Mediterranean Revival style buildings of Davis Islands. As such, the HBC administrator scheduled this review for a public hearing by the Historic Preservation Commission, and public notice for this meeting and the hearing has been complete. Just briefly, I would like to go over the way that this particular property is designated, just so that there's no confusion. In the 1980s, there was a survey of the Davis Islands properties to determine if any of them were eligible for listing in the National Register. At the time, the group that did the survey was the Historic Tampa Hillsborough County Preservation Board. And that preservation board, along with the State Bureau of Historic Preservation and the Florida National Register Review Board, determined that while there was not sufficient density on the island to propose a historic district, it was appropriate to list these buildings as part of a multiple properties listing. A multiple properties listing is a thematic group of properties that are listed under a cover document, which provides the historical framework and basis for evaluating the eligibility of related properties. This cover document facilitates the evaluation of the individual properties by comparing them with the resources that share similar physical characteristics and historical associations. A property listed under a multiple properties listing is considered individually eligible for listing in the National Register. So in 1989, 21 buildings, including 418 Blanca, were listed in the National Register under this cover nomination. And 2 additional buildings were listed under this multiple properties listing later in 1989 and then in 1990. It's for a total of 23 buildings on Davis Islands. The buildings that were listed as part of the multiple properties listing represent some of the best examples of the eclectic Mediterranean revival style in the Tampa area and derive further visual and physical importance from their island setting. The original plan of the community is still very much evident in the relationship to one another of the historic buildings, street plans, canals, and bays. So to orient you to, again, going back to the specific property, 418 Blanca is located at the south end of Blanca Avenue, near its intersection with Davis Boulevard, West Davis Boulevard. You can see on the aerial map here that it is located adjacent to one of the canals that goes through Davis Islands. The canal on its west end opens up into Hillsborough Bay. The Sanborn maps for Davis Islands do not show, they don't go this far south on Davis Islands until the 1976 edition of the Sanborn maps. So we don't have any earlier ones to share with you here. You can see the 1976 Sanborn map here showing the main building, the primary structure on the property, and the garage that was not original to the site, but was added at some point later. In some of the aerial maps that are in your staff report, you can see that it starts to appear by at least the 1960s. What's missing, curiously, on the Sanborn map is the accessory structure, which the owners refers to as the boathouse, which is located on directly adjacent to the channel there, to the canal. We know that building was original to the site, however, because it appears in some of the early pictorial evidence, and I'll show you in a minute. To continue this with the orientation to the site, this is the aerial view facing west. So Davis Boulevard's in the foreground here. The primary building is noted with the garage addition to its north. And you can make out the accessory structure located adjacent to the canal, right by the water there, by the boats. And then looking in the opposite direction, you get a little bit better view of the rear of these structures. You can see how the garage now connects to the primary structure. There is a loggia on the rear of the primary structure that was added, we believe, in the 1970s. And again, you can see the proximity of the boathouse to the water. This is the primary elevation of the primary structure. Note some of the details in it. It has a very symmetrical facade, which is something that the architect, this particular architect really liked to do, with symmetrical facades. You see these symmetry extending not only out from the main entrance, which is a recessed front door in the arch, and but also to the garden wall on the south end of the house and the secondary entrance on the north end. You can see the brick ribbons that previously led to the accessory structure there on the foreground on the left. This is the north end of the primary structure and the attached garage. You can see some of the decorative brackets and vents. Note that the windows consist primarily of the double hung sash wood windows and the casement windows. This is the rear of the primary structure. You can see the loggia that was added at a later date, and the garage addition there. The chimney topper it does include some of the original ironwork. And then this is a view of the accessory structure or the boathouse. Alterations to the boathouse include the replacement of its original front, I guess, elevation with the French doors and the infill of the original windows that were on the north and south sides. So going back to the 1920s, this is a photo that we found of the property in the background of this view of the construction of one of the bridges over this particular channel or canal in 1927. You can see the original window configuration of the building there. It's just in case there's any confusion about what we're looking at, this is the primary structure here that I'm circling with the mouse, and the accessory structure here with its original windows that have since been filled in. And this is a 1946 view of the property, taken from the south looking north. Again, you can see the buildings in their original configuration here. This photo is also taken in 1946. The architect for this building was Franklin O. Adams, and it was constructed by Gustavus Hansen. In this 1946 photo, you can make out the decorative ironwork that was present on the building. In addition to what remains on the chimney topper, there's also some decorative grills over the windows and a decorative little balconette, which featured scrolled ironwork above the doorway. And the gate to the rear of the property, which is no longer present. This building is constructed in the Mediterranean Revival style. It features barrel clay tile roofing, the stucco finished, and its cast stone elements. The casement and double hung windows are typical to the style, as are the wrought iron and the cast stone details. This photo is from 1989 during the when they were preparing the National Register nomination for the site. So to go back to the code, section 27260, again, requires that we determine whether or not this building proposed for demolition meets any of the criteria listed in section 27260B1. And staff did find that this building is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. So that meets criteria B11. So as such, the administrator did schedule this for the public hearing today, and you are here to make a determination as to whether or not to issue the demolition permit. If you find that this building is not eligible for local landmark designation, then the demolition permit will be issued. And the demolition permit is in effect for 1 year from the date of approval. If you find that the building is eligible for local historic landmark designation, then the HPC shall submit written information to City Council supporting its statement that irreparable harm will be done to the property if the demo permit is issued. And the HPC administrator will submit all additional information regarding the property's eligibility for designation. So with that, we have to look at section 27257 of our code, which contains the criteria for landmark designation. The criteria to qualify as a landmark site, multiple property designation, historic conservation overlay district, or historic district. When designating a landmark, you have to look at certain criteria. The first part of this criteria is subsection A, whether the building site, structure, object, or district was constructed or achieved significance during a period of historic significance as delineated in the National Register guidelines or as established in the nomination pursuant to those guidelines. In this case, we have the Mediterranean revival style buildings of Davis Island's multiple property listing, which establishes a period of significance of 1926 to 1932. And this building, having been constructed circa 1928, falls within that period of significance. Section 27257A goes on with part 2. And this subsection reads that the property must have a quality of significance in American state or local history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture, which is present in district sites, buildings, structures, and objects that possess integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, and here we have, following that, we have the particular criteria that you have to find that the building meets. Staff and the National Register listing have found that this property meets part 3 of this, which is that the property embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction in the area of architecture. And this criteria is the same as National Register Criterion C, which is the criterion that is noted in the National Register listing, which we are submitting into the record, and we do have a copy. For the record there. So staff finds that the demolition permit application, which was submitted December 12th, 2024 for 418 Blanca, was for a property listed in the National Register of Historic Places requiring this Historic Preservation Commission public hearing. And that staff finds that the demolition would result in irreparable harm to the property and that the property meets the criteria for local historic landmark designation in section 27257A. But then there is also a subsection that must be considered, which is subsection C. And subsection C, there we are. I believe I skipped over this slide, apologies. Subsection C addresses the criteria, in addition to the criteria set forth above, you have to consider the following factors for the landmark designation. One, whether the owner supports the designation, and two, whether the owner has timely applied for and adequately established an economic hardship in accordance with the requirements set forth in section 27-259, and if so, whether economic incentives are applicable to adequately offset any economic hardship. So it is important for you to note that the applicant submitted this application, HPC 25000016, on March 14th, 2025, requesting an economic hardship determination to abate the landmark designation of the property. So with that, I'll go back to our finding here that, yes, the property meets the criteria for local landmark designation in subsection A, in that it does meet the appropriate date of construction and the section of our code that is consistent with the National Register criterion C, but it does not meet the criteria in subsection C regarding the owner's intent for designation and the determination of economic hardship. So the action that's in front of you today that's required is for you to determine whether or not 418 Blanca Avenue meets the criteria set forth in sections 2760 and 27257. So that's the demolition emergency action section and the landmark designation criteria section. If you find that it does not meet the criteria, then the demolition permit will be issued. If you find that it meets the criteria, we need to look at their request for a determination of economic hardship. With that, I am available for questions, and we will turn the podium over to the owner and the owner's agent for them to present any additional testimony that they have. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Bear with me 1 second. Okay. Good morning. Madam Chair, members of the commission, for the record, Michael Brooks, 400 North Tampa Street, Suite 1910, Tampa 33602. I want a point of clarification, if I may. Let's see if this is a slide that we have in our deck, but I want to make follow up on something that Ms. Lund said, and I think Ms. Lund did, by the way, did a very good job of flow charting what can be a challenging set of city code provisions when you're reading them together. But the way that we read this subsection C, is that the commission is required to consider the owner's objection to the designation and the issue of economic hardship and whether it exists as part of making its designation, landmark designation finding. Because what that introduction phrase says is, in addition to the criteria set forth in subsection A and B above. And I raise this point because I'm going to go ahead and give our presentation. Not going to surprise you if you've read the backup, that it primarily focuses on economic hardship. And so for that reason, I think this is an appropriate framework for our presentation. So with that, all right. Lane, I don't know that I know how to get out of yours.
Here's our hearing here.
All right, I'm clearly 60 years old now.
I think yours were.
Yeah, that's yours.
Close that.
There's me. All right. Last question. How do I go into PowerPoint mode?
There's a little different ways to do it.
Okay. Appreciate the indulging me here. So as I said, my name is Michael Brooks. I'm the attorney for Brian and Shannon Sampson. Brian Sampson is here in the audience with me today, together with Dr. Hank Fishkind. Some of you may know Mr. Fishkind from other cases and matters in local government. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Rebecca Kurt has worked on this with me, and our co-counsel Ethan Loeb as well. This has been a challenging 6 months for the Sampsons. I think almost everybody in this room has either been impacted by the hurricanes or knows somebody who is substantially impacted by the hurricanes. The Sampsons, and I'm going to tell you that story, they are 6 months out. Their lives have been on hold. They are essentially living with their 2 daughters up on the second floor because of the electrical systems that aren't operational, the mold that's beginning to increasingly grow into the home as they try to figure out what their next path is. So against that backdrop, I won't elaborate on things that Ms. Lund did a good job of, but this is the location of the property. It's about, from a north-south standpoint, it's about halfway down the entrance to Davis Island. It does sit at the, it is a waterfront lot. The Currituck Channel, I may have slandered that, but it sits at what is a funnel of water coming into the islands as it was designed. We know from the survey that the adjacent seawall for the property is roughly 5.4 feet, and the finished floor of the primary structure is 8.59. This is the homestead property for the family and has been since they purchased it in October of '22. This slide is just for purposes of, Ms. Lund touched on this, but I want to make clear because this is a distinction I think that's important when we start talking about particularly mitigation options. The primary structure is on the right of this photo, I'm sorry, on the left photo, and the right side of the left photo is the primary structure. To the left of the primary structure is that addition Ms. Lund referenced. That addition sits at grade at about 6.5 feet above sea level. So you've got the historic home that is elevated on wood joists, and then you have the addition which does sit on grade. And then what we do call the boathouse, I think historically the carriage house I've seen in some of the documents is on the right. It has been, from what we can tell, substantially renovated over the years. From what may have been a horse and buggy carriage to what now has served as the boat storage building. So I touched on why we're here, and not to sensationalize it, but this really is a case about last fall. We had Hurricane Helene come in September of 2024. The Sampsons had not even lived in the house for 24 months at this point. And then, of course, then Hurricane Milton came 2 months after that, and that was all 6 months ago, which seems to some of us like it was yesterday. Former Councilwoman Linda Salceda has described in the Stroll magazine that Davis Islands have seen nothing like this in its 100-year history. I don't know whether these are independently true, but she states reports indicated that half of the homes on the island were flooded, and 10% of the housing inventory may be torn down. And at least from my layman's perspective, it seems about right from the damage that at least is visually observable. The city of Tampa just completed a vulnerability assessment in March of 2025, and they note that Davis Island experienced significant flooding from Helene, of course, noting that the water rose to an elevation of roughly 8 feet based on the East Bay tidal gauge, number 8726674. Water came over the seawalls and entered the island over top of the seawalls. It came in through the storm drains, and it inundated, for all intents and purposes, almost every part of the island. The damage to the home was substantial, and what you have here is a photograph that you may have seen similar photographs that friends have shared. The water came in at night, and so everybody was watching in the middle of the night as the water was rising, particularly those who were on the waterfront lots. And unfortunately, the water did come. And on 418 Blanca, it came all the way up to the floor of the primary structure. It entered into the boathouse, it entered into the addition, obviously, which are at a lower grade, and came up to the floorboards of the primary structure. In the application we provided and in the binders, and by the way, I should say just quickly for the record, I handed out binders to each of you, which are the exact same documents that were submitted digitally. The one of you that got the white book, I ran out of letters, and so yours are 1, 2, 3, and 4 rather than A, B, C, and D. Sorry about that. Tab G, there are 2 independent adjuster reports that were done on behalf of the Sampsons. They were done by On Target Claims. These adjuster reports are both in your backup in Exhibit G. They're labeled G1 and G2. For Hurricane Helene, the adjuster found, and again, we're talking about insurable damage here, of $268,000 roughly. For Hurricane Milton, the adjuster found insurable damage of slightly over $300,000 for a total of $569,690.18, again, of insurable damage. Go to the next slide. There are 36, in G1, there are 36 pages of photographs attached to that. I'm not going to go through all of the photographs, but these are just some samples. They are broken up into 3 categories. There are interior photos, which are primarily focused on looking at the damages to the floors and the lower parts of the wall. Extensive damage in the crawl space. One thing that we know about post-storm is that the water, even when it does recede from the island, it doesn't necessarily dry up underneath these homes. And so the water stayed underneath these elevated structures for some time before it dried out. Obviously, moisture and wood is never a good combination. And so you can see in these photographs, you've got descriptions of twisted joists, warped boards, and the growth of mold as well. Just a few sample of exterior pictures. You can see the water level came up above a lot of the outlets, came up above the HAVC, came up above the pool pumps. Those types of outdoor exterior improvements were impacted. I'm not at this point going to go through all of the photographs for Milton, which are G2. There are 57 pages of photographs there. The general gist of that is that the water damage was coming from outside. It wasn't coming floodwater. It was driving rain that was pushing the walls. It was twisting the windows. It was causing damage to the roof, all of which resulted in substantial water intrusion into the walls and damage to the windows. There are, in a number of those photographs, many of them, there are water meters held up with the photos where you can see readings in the 70s, which means there is a lot of moisture inside those walls. The damage to the boathouse is this next slide here. The damage to the boathouse is not insurable, so it is not included in the insurance numbers that you saw. We do have an estimate that we put into the record of $73,255 to repair that boathouse back to its pre-storm condition. So the next slide, this is where actually I just started a moment ago, which is to talk about 27-257 and its segue into the economic hardship criteria. For the record, I just want to make clear the owner does not support a designation, and that's not because they're not historic preservation sensitive, that they don't appreciate that we've come here after a lot of work and that this is that there's a lot of history behind this home. But there's an economic reality to this situation. And so for that reason, they do object to the designation, and we're going to move forward and talk about the economic hardship. I will say, though, that we're unaware of any of the other properties that were part of the 1981 multiple designation that have been individually designated. Staff may correct me on that, but we're not aware that this has happened yet. I think you do need to take into consideration the damage to the structure. And when we talk shortly coming up about what type of mitigation techniques, what would that structure look like if it were elevated or it could be elevated? And then obviously the owner's position is that we have an economic hardship. So what does an economic hardship mean? Well, in some ways, you might read this and say, I'll know it when I see it. So what 27-259 says is that the owner shall be entitled to initiate this determination of whether it exists and it would abate, to a degree that it would abate the designation. And then it goes on to define economic hardship as an inordinate financial burden. And there are factors for that, which I'll go to this in the next slide. But I want to use this slide to describe what we're comparing, because you've got to compare something to something. Typically, these cases come to you without storm damage. And the analysis is in some way at its core is the value of the structure or the property before designation, after designation. In this case, obviously, we've got a damage component. But in that framework, we're going to use the property appraiser's assessed values. And the number of 902,879 is the number we've used. I will point out that is the assessed value of all the improvements on the property. If you back out the boathouse, if you back out the additional features, if you back out the portion that is attributable to the addition, the primary structure is slightly under 800,000. And we're using this higher number, though, as a worst case, because ultimately the conclusion is going to be that the cost to repair exceed the value of this home. And so with that, 27-259 has 8 criteria. These are things that this commission shall consider when they're considering application for economic hardship. I'm going to go through some of these out of order, and I'm going to leave the real economic hardship for Dr. Fishkind to come up. So if I can go through these real quick. Number 2 talks about a pro forma financial analysis. To us, this seemed to go towards a commercial piece of property. As I mentioned, this is the applicant's homestead. He's not attempting to get a yield out of this property, et cetera. Cost of rehabilitating, not including the future flood proofing, which we'll talk about. Cost and expense, I've already given you those, again, minimums. The insurable cost of $569,690. I do break out the insurable damage that's attributable to the addition, which is a little over $39,000. Although that number, from a percentage standpoint, is really immaterial when we look at the overall cost of the value. And as far as the timing of repairs, completely uncertain. We are 6 months out. The applicant has, as of yesterday, filed a notice of intent to sue its insurance company. So when I started this and I said that this family's lives are upside down and in limbo, they're just trying to find closure on some end so they can plan for the future. Economic incentives. There was talk about this, particularly the Hillsborough County tax program. As we read the tax program rules, it is a tax break on the increase in value attributable to those improvements that are the subject of that application. But more importantly, on a practical matter, it requires a designation. It requires an application and submittal. It requires plans. Then it goes to a discretionary body for a vote. And then lastly, Dr. Fishkind is going to speak to, we don't think there's any economic value at all, even if that were to be granted. It's equally as speculative as whether the insurance company and when the insurance company pays out for its portion of the damage. Last two slides. Damage due to the act of God. This is clearly an act of God. This is not negligence of the owner. In fact, they have invested nearly $800,000 in this property since buying it, both in exterior improvements, pools, things of the like, and deferred maintenance inside the house. And then lastly, number 7, the finished floor does not meet FEMA minimum. I started there. This is is at least 2.5 feet above minimum FEMA finished floor. So with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Fishkind to come up and introduce himself, and he's going to speak to items 1, 3, 5, and 8 on a separate PowerPoint.
If you could tee up that separate PowerPoint, I'd be indebted.
Was the other one?
Hank slides.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, how do you put it in mode?
Thank you very much.
For you?
Start the show. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hank Fishkind, Fishkind Consulting, 3504 Lakeland Drive, Suite 107, Orlando, Florida, 32817 for the record. I was asked by Mr. Sampson to do an independent analysis of economic hardship, and I want to share that analysis with you. Just briefly, why am I qualified to tell you anything, and more importantly, to give you expert testimony on this matter. I have a PhD in economics. My fields are econometrics and urban and regional economics. It means I make numbers and I study small areas and market analyses in cities, counties. I was a founding board member of 2 publicly traded real estate development companies, Summit Properties and Engel Homes. We had extensive operations here in the state of Florida. My current residential engagements include working for Lakewood Ranch, SMR, Tavistock at their Sunbridge properties, Times Square Equity, they're building residential and apartments in Boynton Beach, Florida. And for the Falcone Group in Margaritaville, we're building residential properties in Kissimmee. I'm regularly engaged by my clients to analyze real estate projects similar to what you have here, and I've given expert testimony on these type of matters, and my resume and qualifications are attached. In brief summary, as an economic matter, denial of the permit, in my view, would create an economic hardship and an inordinate burden pursuant to 27-259. it's pretty straightforward from an economic perspective. The cost to repair and rehabilitate the home exceeds the value as rehabilitated, which is a classic definition of hardship. As an appraisal matter, for example, the Appraisal Institute says that the damage is incurable. And the test is a comparison. If the cost to cure is more than the anticipated increase in value, then it's not curable. And that's consistent with economic theory about hardship. And that's exactly the situation we have here. Home is valued at $902,879. That includes, as Michael said, the home and all the appurtenances, because the demolition would apply to everything on the property. So I think that's the right comparison. The costs, the insurable costs, as Michael said, constitute more than 50% of the value of the house. And in those circumstances, that triggers the FEMA rule. The FEMA rule would require that the house be raised above the floodplain, which is 12 feet, and that it come up to code, unless there's an exception. And there are exceptions that are sometimes granted for historical structures. But I think in this case, it would be very difficult to achieve that. It would be difficult to achieve that because of the extensive damage to the house and what would be required to rehabilitate it. I mean, if it's picked up and there's all this rehabilitation, those things compromise the historic value of the house itself, which in my experience makes it very difficult to get those exemptions. And even if you could get the exemptions, then we'd have a house sitting at sea level. That's just not sustainable. It's not insurable. So even if just the insurance was used to restore and rehabilitate, leaving the house at its current elevation, it wouldn't be insurable, in my view. And that would be a default on the mortgage. So they can't really do that. So in order to make the home floodproof again, it would have to be raised, and that raises the total cost of rehabilitation to more than $1 million, which is greater than the value of the home as restored. And so that is why it's my conclusion that this is an economic hardship. And I will stop there and turn the podium back to Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fishkind. All right, I see we have 7 minutes. We won't use all of that here. I really have one slide here. In that 2 points I want to make in conclusion, or maybe 3, given Dr. Fishkind's analysis, if this property was not burdened by the 1989 National Registry designation, I don't think we would be here today. Owner would have already made a rational economic decision to demolish the structure because the costs to repair it exceed the value. I want to close with two thoughts. One is that in a document titled Storm Guidance for Florida's Historic Properties, a fairly substantial publication, March of 2023, was done through the Florida Department of State, the Division of Historical Resources. And there's a section in that document about mitigation, historic mitigation and damage, and particularly this type of situation. And the point that I want to make is that the document acknowledges that there are times where a building has been so severely damaged, or the mitigation measures, or together with the mitigation measures, are just so costly that it may be difficult to obtain flood insurance, that demolition may be the mitigation option here. In the mitigation option, in the context of, as a community, how do we protect our structures from flood damage? We now have a really good idea that hurricanes can't come through the bay, and what happens when that water begins to rise on certain properties. And so whether it's a hospital, a sewage plant, or fire station, we're all looking for ways to mitigate that flooding damage. And in this particular case, with 418 Blanca, it's our position that the only mitigation option is demolition and start over. With that, we're open for questions. We'd encourage questions. We've been working on this for, since at least December.
Thank you. Commission?
From the city attorney's office. I believe Mr. Fernandez has some additional information to give before we go into questions and public comment.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is a very complex situation that arises for these types of properties. I do want to just commence, by the way, Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager, for the record. I do want to just give some context to the situation, because these have come before you in different, depending on the length of your term, you may or may not have sat for requests for demolitions of properties that were either listed or eligible for listing on the National Register. And when that occurs, there's obviously a very prescribed sequence of information and applications and hearings that occurs. And I do want to acknowledge that this is unique among some of the previous, which I'll call elective, more elective type of applications, because we're dealing with situations that are a result of natural disasters, and the city's processes don't necessarily have a footnote for what generates an application. But I think given what the staff has been experiencing with our low-lying historic areas, and then obviously what the community has experienced and been impacted and been dealing with, has been really unprecedented in our city. So we're sensitive to that. However, the code requires that we do engage in this discussion because of the nature of these structures being historically recognized. Under Section 259, it's a section of the code that deals with demonstration of economic hardship. So you have, essentially 3 sections of the code that we're dealing with this morning. So I just want to kind of circle back to sort of the sequence of what's occurring under Section 27259, where the application for determination of economic hardship has been filed by this particular property owner, 418 Blanca, and contingent on your determination of eligibility for local landmark designation, you would also consider if a demonstrated economic hardship appears to have been demonstrated in the previous presentation and through the exhibits that were submitted that could change the direction that the process that this particular property would take. Instead of going to City Council, if there is a demonstration of economic hardship, your acknowledgement and motion would then release the demolition permit for approval under my review, and set aside any conditions that you may apply to that approval. The applicant did timely submit on March 14th, 2025 for the review of economic hardship. That is an action that has to occur through the submission of not only the request, but all the exhibits that were presented to you just a moment ago. Under 27259, there's also supplemental information that's required in addition to the 13 elements that are indicated in your staff report on page 3? 2 and 3. So you see that information that's delineated on 2 and 3, and then in that table that's presented with the language of the code, and then on the left, and then what was provided or what was requested to be presented at today's hearing. There's supplemental information that's optional that can be presented. I think the expert in the realms of their economic hardship assessment falls into that category as well. And as part of this review, as was touched upon, the affected property owner shall have the burden to prove that if designated, it would subject the property to an economic hardship. That's really what the code strives to demonstrate through the exhibits and testimony that is requested. And then through this process, you as a commission shall consider the information set forth in the application, the materials, the professional qualifications and expertise of the witnesses, and you will give weight to the evidence that is provided in making your determination. In just a moment, we'll also invite the public to provide public comment, which is also a factor that you can weigh into your decision-making. Through the evidence that was presented, the code does require that the administrator provide a recommendation. That information is delineated on page 6 of your staff report. That's the back page. I'll go through that now. So the HPC administrator requests that further information as required in 27-259 be entered into testimony during the public hearing for the items not directly addressed in the application on pages 2 and 3. Additionally, the applicant should summarize information specific to the claim of economic hardship, including the value of the property and the buildings, the estimates of the damages incurred by the hurricanes, the insurance proceeds, costs of anticipated flood adaptation. I know they touched on that. I think there was a specific number. I think that's an item that you will want to know more information about. Your qualified professionals were present and did provide the testimony related to their submitted report. They did summarize the conclusions that were requested within the report. The HPC administrator notes that the effects and impacts of the 2024 hurricane season were unprecedented natural disasters for our state and city. The damage that resulted was widespread and well documented by local, state, and federal agencies. The assessments and supporting documentation submitted by the applicant and related to 418 Blanca reflect the conditions that are consistent with those suffered by similar properties on Davis Islands during those events. And I'll kind of expand that to let you know that we're dealing with other properties in our local historic districts that were also impacted, that you won't come before you, but are coming before the ARC and the BLC. In the event that the testimony provides adequate supplemental validation of the information previously submitted by the applicant and that contradictory evidence does not arise during the hearing, it is the HPC's administrator's determination that if this property were designated under the parameters of Section 27-257, the property owner would be subject to an economic hardship by the costs projected to accomplish the building preservation, restoration, and flood adaptation measures for the future. It is clear from the information submitted and reviewed that 418 Blanca Avenue has sustained significant damage from 2 hurricanes, the extent of which may still not be evident at this particular time. This determination is specific to 418 Blanca Avenue based on its location, proximity to waterway, damage realized, construction characteristics, and the specific costs and values evaluated. So with that, I believe I'll turn this back over to Kamaria for some direction on how you'll proceed. We do need to take public comment, so I'm sure that's going to be part of next steps. Thank you.
Yes, Kamari Pettis-Matha from the Legal Department. Madam Chair, according to your rules of procedure in 8.4, now we need to see if there are any public comment.
Right, at this time, are there any public comments? If there are, please stand up and come to the podium.
And I did want to point out that you do have a letter in your packet that was provided to the preservation staff yesterday that will be entered into the record from C.J. Collins Smith. And I think we may have to do another swearing for anybody that was not.
Those people back there. One moment. Let her do the swearing first.
Anyone who has not been sworn in, if you could please stand and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you provide today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
One moment.
I was just going to ask, where is that letter? Is that in our packet?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, at this time, you can go ahead and introduce yourself for public comment. Thank you.
My name is Leroy Collins III, and I grew up at 4118 Blanc Avenue. My parents purchased the property in 1973, restored it, and eventually sold it in 2021, almost 50 years. My parents had it added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1989, thinking it would ensure its preservation long into the future. The home was built to resemble a large Spanish farmhouse and is one of only a handful of Mediterranean revival-style homes left on Davis Island. When many homes on the island were left devastated by the recent hurricanes, the main structure of 418 Blanca remained strong. Granted, the garage in the back literally is on the seawall, it's built on the seawall. You'd never see that today, but I have no doubt that got devastated. And of course, the added garage, I believe that was done maybe in the 60s or 50s. Naturally, that's going to get water, like everybody else had. But the main house itself stood strong. The history of a great city is not just a collection of dates, names, and places. It is a living tapestry of stories, sacrifices, struggles, and triumphs. Historic homes, buildings, monuments, and sites are not relics to be discarded. They're reminders of who we are, where we come from, and what we value. Each structure saved, each artifact preserved, is a testament to our collective identity. Preserving Tampa's architectural history is not about resisting progress. It's about ensuring that progress has depth, meaning, and continuity. Look at the Tampa Theater. It was slated for destruction in the 1970s until leaders in the community and the city council stood up and took action to preserve it. When we lose a piece of our history, we lose a part of ourselves, something that future generations can never reclaim. But when we protect and restore and invest in education, tourism, culture, and pride. Think of the Tampa community that gathered around the restored Tampa Theater and what they felt, that sense of unity rooted in shared heritage. These moments matter. They enrich us. They inspire us. Let us not forget history once lost is gone forever, but preserved, it becomes an eternal teacher. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Are there any other public comments?
Now, Madam Chair, Kamaria Pettis-Mackle, for the record, according to your rules of procedure 8.5, the members, the commissioners shall have the opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, this is our time to ask questions for either staff or the presenters.
I have a couple of procedural questions, probably for Ms. Pettis-Mackle or maybe staff. I should have maybe asked it earlier, but there are really two motions that we need to make, one on demolition and one on hardship, or no?
Kamaria Pettis-Mackle, for the record, whether or not, so the sample motions that that were handed out to you, there are three parts to this hearing based upon the information that was presented. Part 1 is the emergency action, and that sample motion is before you to make regarding whether it meets the criteria of Code Section 27-260B1. That's Part 1, the emergency action. Depending on your motion regarding that action, depends on whether or not you move on to Part 2 of your sample motion, which is the local landmark designation. And that sample language is provided for you on the sample motion. And depending on what the commission's motion is regarding Part 2 local landmark designation determines whether or not you do need to go in fact need to go into the economic hardship sample motion, which is Part 3. So every phase of the sample motion depends on the first and second motion.
And while you were speaking of that, is it possible to bring up the slide that had the arrows on it? I think it would better assist us as well. It was during staff presentation. I can't remember which page, but it had the arrows aside. It gave a breakdown of what the commission needed to do today.
I'm sorry, did I finish answering your question?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer. Just clarify again, the issue of local landmark designation and the issue of economic hardship. I'm still a little uncertain. It seems like we've heard the testimony on economic hardship, and that we would have to consider that if we were to consider local landmark designation. But would we necessarily then have to go to accept the economic hardship data? I'm not sure why 2 and 3, as you've suggested, would follow each other.
I don't know that I understand your question,
Okay.
but just to clarify, to reiterate, Part 2, local landmark designation.
Yes.
It is correct that as a part of the criteria for Code Section 27-257, you have to consider whether the owner supports the designation if an economic hardship application has been timely filed. Staff went over that aspect of the economic hardship application when it was included. So that's the information that you consider in Code
Yes.
Section 27-257.
Yes, and I suppose depending on how that discussion went, would we necessarily then also have to vote to confirm the economic hardship afterwards?
Well, that depends again on the motion for the
Yeah, I
local
guess.
landmark
Okay,
designation.
but perhaps not necessarily?
That's up to the commission
Okay,
when you guys
thank
get to
you.
that point.
I'm sorry. I do have a follow-up question because I thought there were only 2, the designation and I didn't have time to read the first one, and I don't think I understand what Part 1 is saying.
So Part 1 is asking the commission to confirm the HPC, meaning Mr. Fernandez's findings that the property meets Code Section 27-261B1 to support his findings. If you disagree with that finding that it meets criteria 27-260B1, then the commission has the discretion to make that motion.
And when I read that decision, his decision, that seems to me to incorporate the answers to Part 2 and 3. Is that the intent, that if we do that, then we skip the other 2 considerations?
I don't know that I understand your question, but Part 1 is simply confirming the finding from Mr. Fernandez. You just determine whether or not you agree with Mr. Fernandez's findings that it meets criteria 27-260B1. That's, just look at it from that.
Which says these 3, I, double
Right.
I, and triple I.
Correct. Just look at it in that silo on whether, for Part A, whether or not you agree with those findings. If you
I guess
want to take the time to just separate the motions, that is in the discretion of this commission to separate the motions. Or if you want to separate your discussion to make it easier for the commission, you could do that as well.
I think what'll be important is we first separate the discussion, because one is the emergency and seeing whether it's supported by, as you say, Mr. Fernandez. Two is the section 27-260, and then the emergency. So first, let's discuss emergency.
Well, if I may, does any of the commissioners, going back to our rules of procedure, I just want to ensure whether or not there are any questions of the applicant or staff.
I have lots of
Overall.
questions. Yeah.
It would be nice to split it up, but we have to
Right.
open it up again.
And then, are we allowed to take a break before we get into that?
If that's what the commission desires.
Yeah.
So we can discuss now as a totality.
I still have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question for the legal. So we can discuss it amongst ourselves when it's closed.
When it's closed,
Yes,
correct, you
okay.
can have a discussion.
So I have a question for Dennis or any of the preservationists. So for the building itself, it only has one criteria, which the property embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type period construction, right? But I was thinking about the architect. Was he not significant? So would it not meet the second criteria, the property associated with the lives of a significant person? Because the architect could be important. So if he is, and this is one of his structures, if he doesn't have a lot of structures in the city of Tampa, or if it's more significant, like it's a higher grade of his architecture, then it would meet the second criteria. Because this would be for the city of Tampa, not the National Registry.
Correct. Once again, Dennis Fernandez, Architecture and Historic Preservation Manager. Typically, architects are covered under criterion C, or in our local code, it would be Roman numeral 3, which, tend to represent the work of a master. That's normally where architects are. I think Mr. O'Adams is a very highly regarded architect. I don't know if he has been qualified previously to rise to the level of a master architect, as someone like Emily Elliott has been in the city. So we did more adhere to the original nomination with the architectural qualification of the building itself, and I didn't extrapolate into different areas, but that is ultimately your decision if you feel by justification that it would qualify. Normally, individuals under criterion B or Roman numeral 2 would be that someone, such as a prominent individual in the community, like perhaps a governor or mayor, or maybe some type of politician or something like that may have lived there or been involved there. So that would be, something that you would have to weigh as far as if that elevates it to that level of recognition.
Okay, but it doesn't necessarily need to have two. It just needs to have one.
Yeah, one criterion is significant for, well, obviously for the National Register, one criterion was significant for listing, and it would be also consistent with other designations that we have in the city for local landmarks.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask, do we have an estimate for the cost to raise the structure? I've not seen that. Is it in our documents? What tab is that?
There is, I'm going to let the
Okay, I just wanted.
gentleman who prepared the report point that to you.
Again, Hank Fishkind for the record. Yes, sir, in my presentation, I gave you the cost estimates that I was able to find to raise the property to
Yeah,
about.
is that documented though by someone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, where is that?
That's it, that was in my report.
Oh, it's in your,
My formal report, yes, sir.
okay, we have an estimate from someone who does that work?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just had one or two more in regard to, you know, some of the things that the staff has identified as missing. I mean, the one that stands out to me is the insurance statement. We don't have, I mean, if the argument is that there's a economic hardship, it's hard to judge that without knowing the insurance situation. I also note that although in the affidavit, we have there's a sworn statement and proof of loss for the flood damage, but is there one for the wind damage too?
Yes, those are in the two adjusters' reports, sir. And those were also submitted in the record. Circling back to insurance, it's very hard to get a broker to give us an estimate at this point in time, but my point being to you, sir, that the costs to rehabilitate are greater than the value of the home. Hopefully, rehabilitating would allow to even get the insurance. Without raising the home, I do not believe insurance is going to be available on commercially reasonable terms based on the criteria and estimates and research that I've done.
Yes, Chair, I have a question as well. I saw on the application there were a few portions that were not provided. One for the receiving to purchase or lease the property. During this during this time of hardship, were there any offers on the home? And also the last portion for income, the gross, it says not applicable. And I wanted to get a bit more information. Also, the cost to cure the exceeding value of the repair. I see the outline in your report for the cost to raise for $500,000, but if you can give, you know, the complete report, I would like to see, because I saw that the tax collector, their 50-50 rule, I didn't know if that was incorporated into the rising, you know, the price to raise the home. So if you have a complete report of that or something that I can see to see if that's added into the value. Because I know FEMA has a lot of rules and regulations, and I know there's some new things that are coming down, but I would like to kind of see, you know, if it's on point, the target is on point.
Concerning the 50-50 rule,
Yes.
the 50-50 rule would definitely apply. The only issue is whether or not an exemption might be obtained. And I explained in my testimony to you
Yes.
that it is highly unlikely, but certainly would be possible, but not likely. And even if that exemption was obtained, and one did not have to then increase and elevate the house would be left in a flood-prone situation, which is not insurable in my work. And that would be a default on the mortgage. So that's not really a tenable position for the owner of the house. So I think whether or not a FEMA exemption is obtained, the only rational economic thing in this situation would be to elevate the house to protect it against the flood. But all of that is contained in my formal report that was submitted in the record.
Okay. And staff, are you able to point me to that document? Because I want to make sure I can make a clear decision and see for myself. Commissioners, do you have any other questions?
So the agents indicated that the report's under tab F of your binder. And I just wanted to add on to the discussion on the 50% rule, because I know that it gets a little bit complicated when you're dealing with exemptions and historic properties. How that's been applied in the city of Tampa has been that it's applicable to the historic portions of structures. So in other words, that addition would not be eligible for an exemption under the 50% rule if it were granted. And there also has to be a approach that does not adversely affect the historic character of the structure. So that's something that would be determined in this particular case through the State Historic Preservation Office and not the local board. So that's what that process that Dr. Fishkind was referencing it occurs mainly through conversation between the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service to determine if the mitigation from, in this case, water by elevating, would essentially delist the property, potentially could be delisted if it was not done in a way that maintained the character of the structure.
Okay, so so I'm sure, if the home is raised, it still would not qualify for historic preservation if it goes through that process? Because the structure would then be tampered with.
So, this is somewhat of an emerging issue with preservation, particularly in our state and in any Gulf Coast states that are being impacted routinely now by sea level rise. And there are guidelines that are put in place for flood mitigation through the National Park Service, and there are approaches that are done throughout these areas that have been impacted that are actively elevating structures. I mentioned that we have that ongoing through the Architecture Review Commission on several properties in the Hyde Park Historic District. So there is not just necessarily a connection between elevating a structure and losing historic designation for being essentially compromised by that particular act. It has to be done in accordance with those standards. And then there's also, it's a progressive type of approach where you begin by trying to do the least intrusive approaches, such as waterproofing, changing materials to moisture resistant options instead of perhaps natural materials, and then progressively leading to the last element, which would be possibly elevating the structure. And that's what several property owners have chosen to do in these areas.
I'm sorry, and one last question, maybe the homeowners can provide that information, or any offers received, purchase, is that something that they have to answer? I know it's not provided, but within the, doing the application and all of this happening, has there been any offers on the home? I see the home value is at close to $9.5 million for the property and the land. Just for my information, has there been any offers?
I think that's something that the agent will need to address.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may enter your question?
Yes.
Sure. In fact, if I may use this as an opportunity, there are several items that Mr.
And also the remaining ballots and mortgage.
want to do basically some cleanup. There were several sections that the staff report identifies that there may not have been information provided. The first is, actually, let me do the one that you just asked, which is no offers, which is XI 11. In the owner's affidavit, number 15, that's where they respond to that. There have been no offers, no other contracts, et cetera, et cetera. If I may, there are three other sections here. Under section 5, letter V, there's a note that we've not provided any valuation testimony after designation. I believe Mr. Fishkind has covered that. His conclusion is, if there's any questions, we can certainly bring him back up, but his conclusion was that it would, the value would be still less than the cost to actually repair the structure. So we're not looking at an increase in value. I did testify as to, under 7, which is VII, the 3 years of expenses that the Sampsons did make when they moved into the home. They did make substantial improvements in full anticipation that this was going to be their forever home. The number that I testified was $800,000. We can certainly bring Mr. Sampson up here to substantiate that as well. The last one was that, with regard to the mortgage, there is a copy of the mortgage in the application itself. I think it's tab B. But to the question of what is the monthly mortgage rate, it is approximately $15,000, and there's roughly $3 million balance remaining on that mortgage. So, Madam Chair, was that responsive to your question?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Commissioner?
And I will still have rebuttal, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't mean to keep pressing this, but I mean, the only documentation I'm seeing for the cost to elevate the foot is elevate the structure is a footnote to a website.
Yes, sir, and I also spoke to the owner of the company, and so it's the conversation with the contractor and his website.
But
And
there's
that
no more
was-
documentation than,
No, we didn't get a contractor out
okay,
to
that's a
do.
big part of your calculations, like over half?
Yes, sir.
It should be better documented than this.
Well, what I would,
I mean,
what I would tell you is that that is the lowest bid that we were able to find without getting a
how
contractor
many
to the
bids did
site.
you get?
Yes, sir.
For the record, Michael Brooks, we do have a second bid for the elevation. Let me say though, when we're talking about the elevation, because there were a comment made about the structural integrity, we are assuming that the structure can be elevated. Now, I believe you're an architect, or we've got architects on this board. You know, we talked about the fact that the primary structure is on joists. The addition is slab on grade. So, you know, we're talking about a shearing of those connections at minimum if it were to be elevated in place. And I raise that because these general estimates are the best case, right? It's not until you actually elevate, you've got to reconnect the water lines and the electric lines, and you got to mesh it into the other existing structures that you start finding out what the costs really are. But on the Elmo, I do have an estimate from Modern Movers to elevate the structure for $500,000. That is about $46,000 less than the estimate that Mr. Fishkind used, but in the grand scheme, those numbers still percentage-wise, the repair costs and the flood-proofing mitigation still exceed the value of the structure, no matter how you put those numbers together. I will enter this in the record with the clerk.
Yes.
On the staff report, it also notes that there was not information provided about the structural soundness. I wonder, I would assume that a structural engineer would do that, and I would assume that it would have been done by now. Has that been done?
For the record again, Michael Brooks, I thought I was touching on this just a moment ago. We are assuming that the structure has the integrity to be elevated. In order to wait for the universe of full information, what is the complete insurance settlement after litigation? What is, after 6, 7, 8 months, what economic incentives are available? How many different contractors did you have to come out to look at the site in order to come through this process? What we presented, what we think is a best case. The actual reality may be catastrophically worse, but what we presented is the best case.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions for staff? Yes.
I have for staff and/or yes.
If I may, before your question, I want to just tag along and just give you some context to the code. requirements for submission. So, the code is static. It does not change. It doesn't envision situations and different nuances with applications. So you have to kind of weigh that information appropriately to the particular situation that's before you. So whereas a property that may come before you and is claiming they have a degree of structural defects and that they're basing their application for demolition based on the structural integrity of that particular property, then you would weigh that structural evaluation differently than an application like that's before you now that's not necessarily weighted on the structural integrity of it, but the costs associated through that particular event. So I want to kind of present that to you that although this is the code, you should appropriately weigh the evidence that you need to make a decision for this particular application that's before you.
Thank you. I had this same question about elevating the building and whether that would affect the designation. And I appreciate the answer. Let's see, forgive me, I had my questions grouped into the demolition issue and the economic issues, so I have my own little code, sorry. To the staff, is the arches on the rear of the building, is that original to the building or included in the designation features?
Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation Staff. Are you asking about the loggia on the rear of the primary building?
Yes, the
Yeah,
loggia and the
that was not
arches.
an original part of the building. It was added, we believe, in the 1970s.
The loggia and the arches?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. Was the pool also damaged? It looked, thank you.
I don't know that that was answered on the record.
Yes, the pool was damaged. It was not an insurable expense, an example of the countless of other things
Correct.
that had been damaged on the property.
Thank you, thank you. Again, sorry, but bear with me. As I understand it, from the documents back to the elevating of the building, the elevation of the primary building is 8.6 feet, and it would be required to be elevated to 12. Whoever can answer that, if I had the numbers correct. If it were to be brought to code.
For the record, Michael Brooks, it's my understanding that 12 feet is the finished floor on Davis Islands.
Okay,
Minimum finished floor.
don't go away, because I have another question or two on that line of questioning. There was a discussion about the cost of elevating the building, and then somewhere in your information that was submitted, it said elevating and relocating the building. And I'm curious as to I can guess, the purpose of relocating, and then what would the cost be for just elevating the building and not relocating it?
So the numbers that we have presented, bear with me if you would.
That's it, both.
Ms. Whiff,
Yes,
at the time that we were, and we wrote that probably few months ago. What we had in mind there when we wrote in relocating is the recognition that the structure most likely cannot just be lifted vertically where it sits. And again, I just talked about the fact it's connected to the addition. So we think that if it were elevated, it would have to shift on the site to some degree, but we're not talking about moving it to another location. I
No,
don't think
but-
you could get it off the island.
Right, it is 2 buildable lots now.
There are
The
2
lot.
lots there, yes.
Okay, I think I've got all my questions answered that were. I guess here's my last question, I promise, or almost promise. Most of your evidence and the discussion relates to the economic issue and the economic hardship issue. Do you have any evidence other than what you mentioned that the owners would not support this if it were designated today, if I understood that correctly? Do you have any evidence that the building doesn't meet the historic criteria for designation?
So the structure, at least the primary structure, and I think the addition, clearly meet the criteria for the fact it's on the registry, right? That's pretty black and white. We are not prepared, and we did not prepare to come here today to argue that there's not some historical significance associated with the home. With that said, we did leave open for this board's consideration, and we think it's appropriate that if the structure were elevated, which is the only reasonable thing to do, if you're talking about spending hundreds, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars more on this property, is what will that do? And I think somebody at the dais even said this, what will that do to the historic scale of the building relative to the other properties, relative to original? I mean, there are some features of it that over time, staff mentioned the iron railings. The insurance company made Mr. Sampson take those off, all right? So there have been changes to it, but I guess I want to come back to the Sampsons fully intended to make a run at this house. And, have spent, as I just told you, $800,000 thus far on the structure before these hurricanes hit. It's just the reality that we're facing.
Thank you for answering that.
Commissioner Swift, if I might add on to that.
Yes.
In your staff report for the section 27, 260, and 257 portions of the review, on page 6, the paragraph right before the staff assessment, this was an area that Elaine and I and Heather discussed quite a bit because there's a certain degree of uncertainty about exactly what the remediation, repairs, preservation approaches are going to mean for the integrity of the structure. There's a lot of, probably suspicions that the damage will creep when the walls are starting to be opened up, or the floor, or perhaps the ceiling and the roof. We already know the roof material has to be replaced. The windows have to be replaced. That's, evidenced in their submission on economic hardship. So, I did, want that addressed as a factor for your consideration in the eligibility of the structure for the landmark designation, because there is a possibility that the integrity diminishes with the replacement of the materials and with the mitigation for flood adaptation.
Thank you.
I have a question. So I guess for clarification and a statement too. So, I think it was with the cost of raising the home. So my understanding from the financial report is that this is a new FEMA rule. So it's actually new, the 12 feet. And that also the house, the main house, because we know that the accessory structure is like on grade, which is very different. But the main house is not on grade, it's already raised. But the new FEMA floodplain is 12 feet. And so there was, I think in the report, it says that there's a, not option, but there could be concessions made, that it could be grandfathered in. Now, I know that there are insurance companies that are historic preservation home sensitive, so that they'll structure their packets or their plans according to the house that you have. You can't just get like a regular insurance company to insure a historic property. And my understanding is that when the house was purchased in 2022, that it should be on the deed that the house is on the National Registry of Historic Places. And so that initially, if you purchase a home, you would know that if something happened, there would be costs that would be incurred because the house is on the National Registry. Now, I do have a question for staff. Now, hypothetical, if we, say it was approved to be designated, motioned, then the economic hardship portion, it could be triggered to be eligible for funding for repairs and things like that. Because now it isn't, my understanding is because it's on the National Registry versus if it's on the local registry, it's more eligible for funding.
Dennis Fernandez with staff. So as far as funding goes, there's a ad valorem tax exemption that was referenced earlier, which is available for historically designated properties. It's available for properties that are on the National Register without local designation in a portion. To get the full exemption, you would have to have the local designation in addition to the national. That being said, it is calculated off of the level of improvements, which is done through the Hillsborough County Property Appraiser's Office. So it's I think it gets a little bit complicated and somewhat, I say this a little bit guarded because I'm getting into an area that I really don't have a reference to point at. When you're just repairing like for like, let's say, without improving, what is the actual increased value of the property appraiser's assessment? I think that would be marginal because you're switching out like for like. Where we see the largest benefits from that particular program is when there's a deteriorated structure, particularly a commercial structure that has a large amount of square footage, and it's being renovated to a more contemporary condition usually for income producing purposes. Okay. So I'll give you an example. The Florida Inn Hotel is going through that particular program right now. It can be done for privately owned properties like residences, but the maximum benefit I think is really through more commercial properties with larger square footage. That being said, my experience with grants that are specifically tailored towards historic preservation, normally single-family residences, are not a type of property that I see being funded very often. I really can't recall a time where I could see where it's actually in residential use. I've seen, previously single-family residences being, converted to different uses and then being funded for that particular use. Case in point, maybe going from like a, private residence to a museum or something like that. So I think that there is, that is a component, once again, of the code that is in there, generally, But I think for this particular situation, you know, the reality of grant funding is probably, you know, very low.
Okay. And not necessarily for you, Dennis, but in the report, I don't even know if I can ask this question, but is the demolition cost noted? How much, because you're demolishing the whole thing?
I don't believe that's really a factor of decision-making for this. You know, it's a little different, I think, if it were being relocated and the cost of relocation was being identified.
I ask because the repair costs are noted.
Right.
That it's gonna be half what the property is worth. But the demolition cost isn't noted, and demolition costs are high, so then why are you demolishing something that, the demo could be higher than the repair? So that's why I asked that question.
I think, you know, it's a reasonable question. There's a lot of information that kind of comes to mind when you're weighing this. I think, you know, I'll kind of point back to the code and what the code asks for.
Yes.
And, you know, that's not a particular piece of information that is required in the code.
Okay, no problem, thank you.
I just wanted to go over, I know this first portion is about demolition. And again, I'm still trying to look through this really big book of information. And I see where the boathouse has suffered some extensive damages. And believe me, I went through a lot of things with Milton and Helene. But I'm really trying to see the structure we're talking about now. I see the wind, I see the windows, but for the amount that is given versus what's shown in the house that is historically preserved, I don't see that. And I'm looking through this report, I'm looking through the demolition review. I don't know, I'm still trying to find more information, but as of now, commissioners, do you all have any other things to add, or would anyone like to recommend a motion at this time?
I have one more question before you close the public hearing. This is for either Ms. Pettis-Mackle or Mr. Fernandez, because I can't understand this emergency action section, and I apologize. So if I'm reading this, our sample motion, it refers to the administrator's recommendation and how I move to confirm the administrator's findings, and I don't see any of these three things in that recommendation.
Only pertains to C.
So perhaps I'm looking at the wrong administrators. I only saw one.
The two staff recommendations.
Okay, I see the other one.
Yes, the staff recommendation, Commissioner Swift, is regarding 27257, and that's part 2, local landmark.
Yep.
National criteria C is regarding code section 27257 and your analysis and discussion of that code section.
I see on page 6 of that, staff assessment. Is that? And
I believe you'd want to look at page 3 under staff assessment and determination, under the staff report that's 27,260 in the upper left.
okay, so that's the same as administrator's findings?
I'm confused on which section, which part of the motion that you're talking about.
On the emergency action pursuant to code 27260B1, I move to confirm the administrator's findings. And I'm just trying to figure out which of those administrator's findings.
I believe what she's asking, every staff report is in correlation with a motion that we need to make. Is there a staff report for this first portion, the emergency action? If so, where is it located?
Yes, it's on page, and Dennis can provide the information of where that information is, but it's also provided in your packet with the separate document about its listing on the, separate document, which is the, here, the National Register of Historic Places form. That's a separate document in your packet that was provided to you. And it's right here on first page that it's listed on page 1, on 27-260, the top right. It's listed, the information provided by staff is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, the year. It says, yes, the year is 1989.
Yes, I guess, again, I'm sorry, what's confusing me is I moved to confirm the HPC administrator's findings. Is that it? It's not, because there's an administrator recommendation.
Because there's only one section where we have an administrative
I
recommendation.
understand, and
Yeah,
Mr.
I'm
Fernandez
just,
can
I'm really just trying to make sure I get my words right.
I understand, and
I'm
Mr.
voting on the
Fernandez
right
can
thing.
just confirm, verify to the commission, part 1, emergency action, your findings for that.
Correct. I think we're getting a little bit distracted with some of the wording, but I think commonly the area that I was pointing to is under page 3, under this segment, in that when the particular record was opened up for demolition under BDE 25044126, that's where we began to evaluate the property. We have essentially a certain amount of period for that to begin with, and one of the first things we do is to see if a property is listed on the National Register. It's like the most, clear form of that criteria being triggered. And you can see my determination at that particular time was that the process should be initiated under 27-260 because the property was listed within the multiple properties listing for Davis Islands.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I hate to do this, but can we take a 5-minute break after we close the hearing?
Well, we still have time for a rebuttal, but yes, I understand that.
Can I ask you a quick question, Dennis? Just on the hardship, the economic hardship staff report. I've been on this commission for a while. This is one of the wording of this recommendation is somewhat different than most I've seen. Seems like the staff is saying that they recommend the economic hardship if additional information, supplemental information is introduced here.
I think the supplemental information that we were seeking was that the testimony from their professional expert on the valuations. We're looking at this, somewhat, in a silo when we're looking at a pre-public hearing. So we're making certain evaluations based on the evidence that's submitted, but then we know that there's going to be testimony and possible supplemental information that's brought in through discussion at the hearing. So yeah, I think my intent was to recognize that if there was no other information that was brought in that would offset the costs that were presented, and that the testimony that was given would validate the information that we based our decision on, then there would be a determination on our part that an economic hardship exists.
Okay, I interpreted it as a reference back to the information that seems to be missing from that.
I think they're related closely. I mean, not to presume that the information that's submitted is going to further reinforce an economic hardship. I can't, go off that presumption. I have to, assume that there might be other information that's available to the public or someone that may participate, during the hearing. I'm also, making these observations, 3 weeks in advance of the public hearing. So there's a little bit of, of a boundary there that we have to kind of cut it off and produce a report to be in accordance with the code.
All right. If there's not any other questions for staff or our presenters. We're going to take a 5-minute recess. All in favor? Back in session. At this time, we would like to offer a space for rebuttal. Council? Team huddle.
I apologize, Madam Chair.
Yes, at this time, we would like to give you a time to rebuttal.
Okay, I just have just a couple prepared comments.
No problem.
And I will not use the whole 5 minutes, but essentially 3 points I want to touch on. One is that we agree with the staff conclusions and the staff findings. I mean, this was an extreme event. This is not precedent setting. Hopefully, this is not precedent setting in the future. And this is just a unique piece of property. Its proximity to the water, and it's an unfortunate set of situation. Second is I want to, if I didn't mention earlier, this demolition permit, or these permits, applications here today, I should say, were on the Davis Island Civic Association agenda for last week. The association considered it and determined that it was not going to object, so there is no formal association present here today or objection of record. And lastly, let me say to Mr. Collins, and I can certainly appreciate the nostalgic and heartfelt words that he was expressing, but they weren't specific to the damage that you have documented in the backup, particularly in tab G. He made a comment about the bones or the structure is sound. We don't know if that's the case, but we're assuming for purposes of cost that the structure can be rehabbed and elevated. But he used an example of the Tampa Theater. And I think that is really a good closing point. And that is because in the definition of economic hardships, one of the concepts is that, is it unreasonable to require a property owner to permanently bear a disproportionate share of the burden imposed for the good of the public, which would be historic preservation, which in fairness would be borne by the publicly at large. In the case of Tampa Theater, I think we're all excited about the fact that the community came together and saved that building, and we all enjoy it now. But that is exactly the example of the community coming together to save something, not imposing upon the property owner an obligation to preserve something that is not economically rational. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will be closing public comments, and we will open up to the commission to discuss.
I think we can do part one
All right. All right.
with if everyone's in need of one. Do you want to take these?
Anyone want to take a
Part.
stab?
Okay. I move pursuant to City of Tampa Code Section 27-260B1 to confirm the HPC Administrator's findings that the property located at 418 Blanca Avenue is a structure of architectural significance for the following reason. It is listed individually in the National Register of Historic Places.
And I will second that motion.
All right, at this time, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, we move forward to confirming that the HPC, let me go back. This property does meet the requirements and support the motion. Thank you.
See.
So Kamaria Pettis-Malka from the legal department, just to organize the commission, now you're going to go through the analysis of whether or not it meets the criteria of Code Section 27-257. Correct.
designation.
And that's making a recommendation to city council, if that is the board's desire.
Do you want to discuss it, or are you going to make a motion? I mean, if we're going to discuss it, I mean, I think clearly, irrespective of the economic hardship, we would probably say it meets the criteria architecturally. The sticking point, no, I'm just part two, local landmark designation. Sticking point is, that we are to consider the owner's approval, which in this case, we know the owner does not want it designated. I'm just saying that we're just only supposed to consider that.
So as we're discussing, I know there's probably a motion going on before. I know they recently stated that there was a neighborhood meeting. I don't see it in the notes where they approved or denied it for either the local landmark designation or the emergency action. So thought that was very interesting to add at the end of the presentation.
I believe
Yep.
their, I don't know if it's in writing, but I believe their meeting was just Tuesday, and it was stated that there was no objection, I think. So I don't know how much more information there is.
At this time, would anyone like to discuss or make a motion for the local landmark designation?
I don't know if this is a discussion or if I can ask. Okay. Well, I'll say that as far as the criteria for designation 27-257, it was the applicant testified, if I'm correct, that item number C, which involves the support of the owners of the property and the issue of economic hardship, is equal to the others. I did not hear any objection from our council to that, and I find that a fairly serious impediment.
So, I believe this has already been said, but when the owners bought it, it was on the register, and and as Mr. Fernandez said, this is a unique, well, sadly not so unique in the future, but this is an unusual situation that the code doesn't spell this out, this kind of situation, but when they bought it, they knew it was on the National Register. I think that makes that criterion a moot point.
Well,
And,
sorry.
can I finish? So I think I think that the designation and the fact that the building has and still does meet the criteria for designation is factual. I think the economic hardship issue is a difference, is what shows that the situation has changed. So I would be open to a motion to designating.
So if there's no other discussions, do you want to discuss or you want to make, because she wants to make a motion?
I want to make a motion.
All
Go
right.
for it. Go for it.
You guys can tell me what you want. I move to recommend the City of Tampa Council designate the property located at 418 Blanca Avenue for local historic landmark designation because the property meets the criteria established in the City of Tampa Code, Section 27-257, for the following reasons. The building, site, and structure or District A1 was constructed and achieved significance during a period of significance as delineated in the National Registry of Historic Places and Guidelines, or as established in the national nomination pursuant to those buildings, and has a quality of significance in American state or local history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture, which is present in districts, sites, buildings, structures, and objects that possess integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And it's 3, really. That embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type of period or material of construction, or that represent the work of a master, or that possesses high artistic values, or that represent a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction, otherwise known as Criterion C of the National Registry criteria.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
One opposed. This has moved forward with accepting to add this property to the local landmark designation. As we move forward to part 3.
Correct.
Economic hardship. There's any questions or we would like to discuss as a commission? If there aren't any discussion, do we have a motion?
I think I agree, but I'm doing it reluctantly.
Well, I'll make a motion considering economic hardship. And my motion is pursuant to City of Tampa Code Section 27-29F, I move that the affected property owner has demonstrated that the property located at 418 Blanca Avenue, if designated, would subject the property owner to economic hardship for the following reasons, which are too many to individually enumerate, but they have, I believe, provided adequate information on the assessed value, the repair costs, and all of the various costs associated with likely implications of a local historic designation. Does that meet our motion requirements?
Well, I would first, Kamaria Pettis-Snapper from the record, the commissioners are welcome to supplement your statement, but there hasn't been a second yet.
Do we have to second it before we supplement?
If you want to add like a revision to his motion, you're welcome to do that, to see if he would second or accept your revision to his motion.
Okay. So I want to add in your reasons that the cost of repair is 50% of the home's value, and that it may not be insurable at its current elevation. I think that's a reason for economic hardship.
Do you accept those?
Yes, I accept that.
I think you might have misstated the code, it's 27-259F.
If you can restate the code with the motion for clarity.
Section 27-259F.
All in favor?
No, you haven't gotten the second.
Oh, you have to go back and he accepted.
Yeah, I second that motion.
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, we move forward with the economic hardship. Thank you at this time. At this point, we will do the update of the Ybor City Historic District map and inventory. Y'all did it.
Commissioners, I just want to just make sure that we're okay on time. We're looking at probably 15 minutes for this next section. Is that okay for our quorum?
I may have to step out at like 11:50, but you'll still be quorum, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll speak as fast as I can.
It's still morning, so good morning. Heather Bonds, Historic Preservation Specialist. I'll be presenting updates to the Ybor City Historic District map today. Our purpose today in presenting you a revised map is because historic preservation staff routinely updates district maps to reflect ongoing development and changes. HBC will accept these changes, or hopefully accepts these changes, as the official Ybor City Historic District map and inventory, which act as the authority on the contributing status of each structure. This is a little bit about the history and the background of Ybor City. In 1974, it was first recognized as a National Register district, and 50 years ago this year, 1975, is when it became locally designated. Throughout its history, it had updated maps. This year, or for the past year, we went out to the field, inspected every single site physically, took pictures to bring you this updated map that we have for you today. Just reviewing some of our historic maps. This is actually a 1965 urban renewal map. A lot of these ideas thankfully did not come to fruition, but thought it was an interesting map to show you today. This is the 1974 National Register of Historic Preservation district map. The 1989 local historic district map, the status at that time. This is the National Historic Landmark map from 1990. In 2011, this was the updated map. In 2013, you notice that red boundary. This is the northern expansion to the historic district map, and a lot of the changes I'm presenting you today are based off of this map. In 2018, we did some format changes, so that's just this map that we continued this format into our 2025 proposed draft today that we have for you. Some of our staff findings that have been updated since that 2013 map. We have 69 new construction footprints that have been added. For demolitions, we had 29 contributing structures that had been demolished. 9 of those are FDOT related from highway expansions. 59 non-contributing structures that were demolished. 2 of those were FDOT related. Relocations, we had 7 total. 2 FDOT relocations, 5 from private individuals. And status changes, we had 12 redesignations, 2 contributing, and 2 redesignations to non-contributing. Here's a look at the highlighted areas that have those updates to them. And just taking those individually, these are the non-contributing structures that have been demolished there in the pink. Those are those locations. Some examples of the non-contributing structures that were demolished throughout the district. The contributing structures that have been demolished are here in red. You notice they're a bit concentrated along the highway. Here are some of those contributing structures that have had to be demolished. 9 of those, again, were FDOT related. Some of the other reasons that contributing structures have been lost are due to natural causes such as fires, lightning strikes, structural issues. This example here at 911 12th Avenue, that was a contributing structure that caught fire. The silver lining there is it became a vacant lot that we were able to move 916 12th Avenue to, which was a contributing structure. So that one avoided demolition due to the expansion of the highway. Vacant lots from the demolitions give us the ability for new construction. Sometimes with this new construction, it gives us the ability to approve a CA for new construction that is maybe more sensitive than some of the non-contributing structure that had been demolished for these in its place. So here's some of those more sensitive new construction designs that use the Ybor City Design Guidelines as a guidance for their new construction. great examples of scale and massing respecting the district. And some relocations as well. These are the receiving sites in orange that have received some of those new relocation to save some both contributing and non-contributing structures. Here's some of those houses on the move. And then some status changes. We had some go from non-contributing to contributing. In the case of Fire Station 2 here, you can see it was heavily altered. They went back to its original appearance, and I believe this board voted to give it back its contributing status. And then we have the others here at Preservation Park. They were redesignated as they moved to their new site as part of the park and the Ybor City Historic Museum. And then we did have two go from contributing to non-contributing. One was because a owner request that went to appeal to City Council, who then approved it. The other reason that you will see a contributing go to non-contributing is due to damage to the structure to an extent that its historic and architectural integrity has been substantially compromised. This unfortunate example here on 7th Avenue was due to an arson attack, unfortunately. We've lost that building. It's now been demolished. So we do have a recommended motion that you accept our revised Ybor City Historic District map and all of its changes. And I think I got that in pretty quickly.
All right, commissioners, at this time, if we can discuss or have a motion.
Well, first off, I'd say good work, and I think that'll be very helpful and useful, and it's just interesting to look at. And unless there are other comments, I'm willing to make a motion that we accept, oh God, the verbiage of these things. I move to accept the revised Ybor City Historic District map of 2025 and all the changes therein.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we move forward with accepting Ybor City Historic District map and inventory. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Under new business, we do have a request to address the board by Dr. Carolyn Collins with the Jackson House Foundation, if that is something that you're receptive to.
Yes. Thank you. And I'm so happy
She's been waiting
to
very patiently
hear this.
here this morning.
Good morning. That's Carolyn Collins, Chair for the Jackson House Foundation Board of Directors. With me earlier was our Vice Chair, Dr. Scott, and I'm not going to take up any time, but I'm glad we've decided to make sure that we're in your meetings, to be present, to ask questions, and perhaps to do presentations in the future as you would ask. But what I have brought with me today is 5 copies for each of the board members. Just a brief minute here to indicate a little update. We had wanted to come previously, and so we kind of was prepared. So I had to end up kind of altering the packet because we had it prepared for April. We modified it for May. We want to give you just a brief overview. Basically, if you look at our mission, it's right on the front. One of them is handwritten where I modified it. But it's the historic Jackson House Restoring History to Inspire Future Generations. Our importance, I would hope we could do that in the future. We have a PowerPoint presentation to show you. But during the month of January, we actually continued our partnership meetings. And these are things that we've been doing ongoing for the last 3 to 4 years on a consistent basis. But in January, we continued our partnership meetings. We're still working towards the easement, I think, and I hope that we're at a point that we can say we'll hopefully see some work going. And I always say within the next 30 days, so this time I'm gonna say even shorter. The Tampa City Council, we did a presentation with them, and we updated them on our annual basis. We do a report on a quarterly basis for the grant that we received from the state of Florida. It is due in every quarter, and after we do that, we have a 6 months renewal for that grant. And what we would like to do is to make sure that we submit to you our same quarterly report that we're submitting to City Council when we submit it to the state, and that'll kind of let you know what we've been doing over the past 3 months. In February, we continued our progress reports and making the original presentation before City Hall, doing some financial updates and things of that nature. In March, we actually did our 2025 sort of getting into the development phase. We also went back to the community. We restarted our community forums. The next community forum will be on June 7th. We had the first one. We had a packed house. 2 media came out and stayed there with us and recorded the whole meeting. And the input from the community was overwhelming and well received by the board. We will have our next one on June 7th. It will be in East Tampa as a request from one of the individuals that was in the meeting. The first one was in Carver City Lincoln Garden in the room there, in their community room. So our next one, it looked like it's going to be at one of the 2 libraries in the area, but we allowed them because the 2 sites that they had actually have renovation going on, and only one could accommodate us but couldn't accommodate parking. We also have some future plans to just continue that, deal with our strategic plan, updating our design plan. And we did meet just recently. Thank you so much. Dennis has really been with our partnership meetings, but he also met with us with the mayor recently. And basically what we'll recap is things that we're doing in the quarter when we come before you. We have PowerPoint presentation, video clips, as well as some images of the Jackson House, and maybe at a future meeting with an invitation, we can do a presentation to you, which would be a short one, but you can see that information as well. And thank you for receiving me.
Thank you so much for what you are doing. The Jackson House is very near and dear to me and my family, so thank you for persisting. Thank you for not giving up. Although this is my last commission meeting, I would love to assist and help because I know that when we preserve our culture, this leaves stories for our children. So I am supportive of you 100% in the foundation. And thank you for including this information because I know over the last 5 years, I myself personally and others on this commission and those who have served have made sure that the Jackson House is not forgotten. So thank you for what you're doing. I hope with this call of action, you can get an architect on your board and others who can assist making this happen. So thank you, and I hope that the commission would invite you back to do a presentation. So thank you again.
And if I can close out on saying that, thank you. And if you know of an architect that is interested on being on our board, tell them we're actually looking for about 2, possibly 3. We just did a total renovation of the board, and we're doing some upgrading, so we'll be more than happy to consider any recommendations from your board and anyone that's interested. Thank you, and let me indicate to you that what you have is our quarterly report, and at the end of the quarterly report, you have our RFP. And we've decided to be a little aggressive, even though people are saying, no, you can't do that. We're no longer taking no, we're moving forward because the House is telling us what we must do. And so as a result of that, we did an RFQ. It has been completed. We did get responses. We took the information from those who felt they were qualified to be architects or engineers to actually not be on the board, but to take on the job itself. And so we've completed the RFQ, and this is the second reiteration of our RFP. It is just on our website and things like that, but we're about to release it publicly. We're just trying to make sure we close out the easement issue. And we're hoping to do that, but we're not stopping.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. And thank you for your service on this board. And it's interesting that we decided we were going to start being here. Didn't know this was your last meeting, and I did have an opportunity to meet you once over at the library when we were getting our marker placed. And so thank you so much for your service to this community, and wish you well. And anyone interested, give us a call.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Collins.
Thank you.
If we could just have a motion to receive and file all the documents and exhibits that were presented today.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, we are moving to Stephanie
Next on your agenda, in accordance with your rules of procedure, I've placed the election of officers on the agenda. However, I do want to pause for just a moment and thank our chairperson, Dominique Cobb, who is concluding her second term on the commission. She will be, I have some individuals who are queued up for replacement of her position, but not necessarily her energy and leadership that she's provided the board. So it's been very nice to work with you. I hope that you consider service again. The code requires that individuals that serve 2 terms take 1 year off. So I usually wait a year and then you'll hear from me again for some other board. So appreciate once again getting to know you and your energy and really passion for preservation.
Thank you, and it has been a pleasure. Each and every one of you have assisted me, and going through COVID, oh my goodness, you have, I was gonna give up, but each of you have been so pivotal. Even you're beautiful, but thank you for, because sometimes I don't know what's going on, but I appreciate those meetings where we kind of get down to it so that everyone can understand, because I know what happens in preservation. Some things may fly over our head, but we need each other to kind of understand what's going on so we can get things done. So I appreciate you all. You all are beautiful, but on to new things. So.
Unfortunately, I have to say goodbye also to Dr. Pluckahan, whose second term is also ending. And we met, well, we probably met a little bit before this, but one of the things that really speak out was when he taught me to do the ground penetrating radar carousel at Oak Lawn Cemetery, and that's where I really kind of targeted him to be on the board. And I stalked him for a little while, and finally he graciously dedicated his time and expertise, and I think you can tell from his engagement that he's been a vital asset to the board. And thank you for your service, and appreciate all the time that you've dedicated to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Thanks.
With that, my suggestion is for the election of officers that this item be continued to the July hearing, when we have 2 new members on the board who can participate in the election, and that would, I think, make for a more relevant process for choosing your leadership.
I agree.
I was gonna ask that, if we could do that, so good idea.
You could do that by motion to continue that item.
I move that we delay our election of officers until our July meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we will move the election of officers to the July meeting. All right. If there is nothing else at this time of 11:51, we will conclude the City of Tampa Historic Preservation. It has been my pleasure to serve you.